Hi everyone, welcome. John here. In today's video we're going to be doing some more product scraping, but this time we're going to be looking at Shopify stores and we're going to build ourselves a sort of slightly more complicated, bit more advanced Shopify web scraper that takes the products and we're going to save it all to an SQL database, but we're only going to save it if it doesn't exist already, and then I'm going to show you what data we get out at the end. So let's get going. For those of you that don't know, if you take any Shopify store and you put /products.json afterwards, you get the JSON output of the products that are live on the store. Now you can't get any products that aren't live. Obviously you need admin access for that. But for the products that are on the front of the store, it just gives us a really easy way of accessing that data. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to need is requests. And then we're going to also need JSON because we're going to be working with the JSON data that comes out. And I'm also going to import data set here as well. Now that is basically just a simplified way of working with a database, an SQL database in Python. You can do it the other way around if you want to write your own SQL queries, but dataset just does those bits for you. It's useful for small projects like this. So I'm going to import that whilst we're here. So the first thing that we want to do is we need to just quickly think about how our project is going to look. So I'm going to create a class and I'm going to call it my Shopify scraper, and then I'm going to create some class functions and then we're going to use those at the end. So I'm going to say class and I'm going to call it Shopify scraper, and it's always good to use capitals for your classes. And then the first thing that we always need to do here is we need to initialize the class with some variables. So I'm going to say def _, init, and then we pass in self because we always need to reference the class itself, and then we're going to give it one other thing, and I'm just going to call this base URL. Now what that is it's going to be the URL of the store. So when we create an instance of this class, we give it the URL for the Shopify store that we're after, and this just gives us a little bit more flexibility and a bit more sort of reusability should we want to take this class and import it into another project or something like that. So let's say self.base URL is equal to the base URL. Now that just means that the information that we give it becomes part of it here. So the next thing that we want to think about doing is we want to be able to download that JSON data from the store. So if we just quickly take this store here, now this is a Shopify store and it's got footwear products, etc., etc. So if I go here and after the URL do products.json, we will get all this information pop up here, and this is the JSON of all the products. Now I normally have a JSON sort of parser prettifier in my browser, but for some reason I don't have it installed on my Chrome. Otherwise we could filter through this a bit nicer, but trust me, this is the JSON for all the products. There are multiple pages, but the easiest thing to do is if you put a question mark and then a limit is equal to 250, which is the maximum it allows. That gives us 250 products on one page, and then to make it go further in you can do the and, because we're just working with the REST API. Page is equal to 2, and that will give us the second page. And if you look at the top product when it loads up, it's different, so we know we've hit the next page. This is actually slightly different to how it works when you're doing it through the admin panel, but in this case it works just fine. Okay, so now we know that we can actually get to that JSON data. We're going to write a function to download it for us. So let's do def and let's do download JSON, and we need to reference ourselves, and we need to give it a page number like I just showed you with the and page there, because otherwise we'll only get the first page, which is no good if you're dealing with large stores. And now we can do RR is equal to requests.get, and we're going to need to construct the URL here. I'm just going to write it in hard-coded. I guess we could maybe do it a different way, but we want to basically take the base URL that we get, so self.base URL, and that comes from up here, what we give it here. And then we want to do plus because we need to deal with just concatenating the strings together. And this is an easy way to do it in Python. Now I'm going to say that we're going to give it the rest of the URL that I just showed you, but we need to be able to add in a new page number every time. So I'm going to do that in a loop later on. So I'm going to put an F string in here, and I'm going to go ahead and copy the end of this products bit, and I'm going to paste it in here. And instead of this page is equal to 2, we're going to go ahead and put page in there like that. So what that means is that when we run this, we're taking the URL that we give it, we're accessing the products.json with the maximum limit, and our page number is the page that we're going to give it to this function. I'm also going to add a timeout here because just to keep it a bit neat and tidy. And when I was testing this earlier, I had some issues where we were going over the time limit, so I just add a timeout there. So basically, if it fails, it only fails in 5 seconds and not a lot longer. Talking of it failing, we need to add in something else as well, just as a check. So I'm going to say that if r.statuscode does not equal 200, now 200 is a good response, that means we're fine. So if we're getting anything other than that, we want to print something out to the screen, and we're just going to say print bad status code or whatever you want to do, and then I'm going to add it in here. So what this is going to do is if it fails for either a 404 or 503 or yeah, that's the one that's blocked, I think, it will print that out here and we'll see at least what's happening. So the next thing that we want to do is we need to know when we want to end, how many pages. Now a good way to do this is to actually just keep going through the pages on your browser and see what happens at the end. So if I go to page 3, so we got no products, but we did get a response. So what we need to do then is we can actually just reference the length of the products list that we get back, because we can see here's the list. And if it's 0, we need to break. Okay, so that's a nice and easy way to do that. So let's do that here. So let's say if the length of, now we need the JSON response back from requests, and our request does that nice and easily with r.json like this. If that is, and we need to reference products because we're giving it the object here, so we need to call this products bit back. If the length of the JSON and products is greater than 0, then we can say our data is equal to r.json products. So we're basically saying, okay, there's more than 0 products, so there's our data, so we're going to return that out of this function. I suppose we could have put that line on there, that's fine. Else, return nothing. Let's move that up so it's a bit tidier. So this is our first function. We're going to download the JSON data, and we're thinking that we need to do multiple pages. So we're going to give it a page variable when we call it. And this is our URL that we constructed that I showed you. And we've got a couple of checks in here. So if the status code is not 200, it's going to print a bad status code, and then it's going to fail. We're not actually doing any other error handling than that. We're just going to print the status code and let the program fail so we can at least see what's going on. And the other one, which is the one that's the most important, is that if the length of the products list that's returned is greater than 0, we get that data. If it's not, we just return nothing, and that should be fine for this. So the next thing that we want to do, I'm going to collapse these two here so we don't need them now. Actually, just get out of this one, return. Let's collapse that. So the next thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to do something with that JSON data. Okay, so let's write something to take that JSON data that we return from here and then put it, get the information out that we want. Because when we saw the information on the screen in our browser, there was a lot of data, and I'll show you that in just a second. So I'm going to have a function to pass the JSON data here. So I'm going to say def pass JSON, and we're going to give it itself because we're in our class, and we're going to give it the JSON data. So right now, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to print the JSON data that we give it, and let's have a look and see where we're at now. So to run our class, we need to create an instance of it. So I'm going to say allbirds is equal to, and we're going to call this, we're going to say this is a Shopify scraper, and we needed to give it the base URL. I'm just going to go grab that because I can't remember what it was. Like this, and there we go. There we go. So now I've created an instance of my class, and now we can do allbirds.download JSON. See, there we go. And let's just give it page number 1 for now. And we return data from this. So I'm just going to say data is equal to, and we can just print that data. We can ignore our pass function for now. We didn't need it for this example. So I'm going to run this, and hopefully we don't get any errors, and we get a load of JSON data dumped to the terminal. except it's not product, it must be products. It's products. See, I've got that name wrong there. So let's just expand that here. Product. There we go. Let's try it again. There we go. Okay. So we can see that we got all of this data back here. There's loads of it. And we can see that our first function of downloading the JSON has worked fine. So we need to write our second one, which we've started here, that takes this data and turns it into something that we want. There's an awful lot of information here. If we look at this one here, you can see that starts with the ID. If I go down, how far do we get? We got images, we got product ID, variants, the whole lot, maybe down to here. So there's a lot of information. If you're doing this for yourself, maybe you want different parts of the information and bits that I'm not putting in. I'll show you how to reference any of this, and then you can just take the bits that you want. But I've pulled out maybe 10, 12 things that I think are the most useful. So let's close that out. So now that we know that this works, I'm just going to move this down to the bottom, not like that, the bottom, not the top, and we'll leave that there. We'll get rid of our print statement because we don't need it. So now we want to finish our function here. So we're going to say that we're going to create ourselves a blank list so we can add all of the products to it that we want to save. And then we're going to start our loop. So we need to loop through each item within products. So if we go back here, and we can see that the first thing we get is products and then a blank list in that case because we're on the wrong page, but we get a list back. So let's just do for prod in, and we're looking at the JSON data that we give it. And let's just print some bits of data out. So let's print out prod, and then I think we can do title is one, and then let's do let's say ID, I think is one. So now if we do our down here, we've got our data, which is our downloaded JSON. We can ignore this error for the moment. You're not using our list, which is fine because we're going to use it soon. And now we do parse data down here. Sorry, we need to do allbirds.parse data down here, and then give it that data that we've called. And because we've got a print statement in our function, this should just print out the title and the ID. That should be parse JSON. So now that should just print out the title and the ID, there we go, of every product. So we can see that we get all of the products here, but we're getting like the top level. That's because we've only looped through the ID. Now, if you look at the JSON, you can see that there is a main ID, but there's also, within that part, there's a variant ID. That's the individual variant of this product. In this case, we want that because that's going to be the sizes of the shoes that we're looking at, and if you're interested in shoe data, you need to know the sizes because otherwise it's useless. So let's go ahead and do something else with that. So what we can do is we can say, because we know that this is going to return each individual sort of main product within the main JSON, what we can do is we can actually loop through that as well. So if we just do let's just do V for variant in prod, and let's print V, and let's do ID as well. Let's remove that one there and just print that out. So what that's going to do is, if we see here's the main ID that I was talking about, we can see here we got variants, and that starts here. So what we're saying is we want to look for this key of variants and then loop through each of those as well. So we need to do variants here. So if you see how I'm starting to construct it, so if you wanted to go through something else that's got a list as well, like the tags, you could just call this, which is under the main product, under the main part of the list, and then go through those tags. So hopefully that will work, and we will get a load of variant IDs. So we should get loads. Look, so now you can see it's starting to come together. We've got this product here, and then there are these variants underneath it, and same with these ones, lots of variants there. So these variants are the ones that are going to have the sizes against them. So we want to basically go ahead and get the sizes, etc., because they might have different prices and all that sort of stuff. So that's how we're going to do that. We're basically just looking at the structure of the JSON, see where the lists are, and see where the parts that are the dictionaries, and then you can just loop through and get that out here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to quickly grab and fill in the rest of this. You don't need to watch me type it out because that would just be really dull. But basically, hopefully you understand how to grab that. So I'm going to copy the whole of this out that I've already done. I'm going to put it in here. So what we've got is, as I showed you, we have the products and we're getting the main ID. Now this is coming from the first level of each JSON item in each JSON part in that list. And then we're getting a few bits of data, and then we're looping through the variants, and we're creating a dictionary here, which I've called item. I have a really bad habit of using bad names. I suggest you use better descriptive names. But we can see that we're getting these bits of information. Now this is all coming from within this variants tag, and this lot is coming from the main part of the JSON for each of the items. So we're saying that we're going to get the main ID, the title, published at, now these are dates, which is good, and then the variant ID, and we're going to use that later because that's the one that's going to be the main key of our database. We get the title, the SKU, which is useful too, price, and the availability, and created at and updated at, and the compare at price. The compare at price in Shopify is basically one of the ways, the main way people do to create a sale. So if you have a compare at price, you know that that item is actually on sale at that time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save this and I'm going to run it, and we should get a load of dictionaries pasted to our screen. Ooh, they'll all fly by, and we can see if I just highlight this one here, we have the ID, the title, when it was published, product type, I forgot to mention that, that's useful, and the variant ID that we're looking at. So this is the specific variant for the medium socks and how much they cost. And if you look up here, there's the one with the small. So this is just a good way of getting our structured data out like this. And we can just put this straight into a database with dataset, which is what we are going to do shortly. So to finish the rest of this, now that we're getting that product, this product data out, what we need to do is let's return out of this function for now. Where are we on this line? And let's collapse that. So what we want to do now is we need to write a main function that's going to do everything for us, and then we can just run it at the end and add it to our database. And actually we need to return, let's just add it to our list right now and then return our products. I meant to do that. So we can see that we're now using our products list, and we're going to add all of the data that we get to that products list, and then we're going to return it from that function. Okay, so I'm going to create a new function outside of our class. We're done with our class for the moment, and that's going to basically control what we do in this code. So I'm going to call it main. If I can type properly, there we go. Now this is going to go into it, so let's put that in. And here we are just using page 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new loop here. And if I remember when I showed you earlier that this takes a page number, and we're going to use a range to do so. And what we're going to do is we're going to loop through each time, and we're going to download the JSON, and then we're going to save it. Okay, so let's do that. So I'm going to say, here's our results list. We're going to add everything to that we want. Now we need to create a new loop here. So I'm going to do for x in range. I'm going to just do 1 to 10 for this case because it's going to break as soon as it finds no extra products. If you're looking at a store that's got thousands of products, just up the page ranges, although that's probably 2,500 products. There will be some that are that big, but not likely. We'll indent this in. So we need to put our page in here. So we're doing X. Let's just call that page, makes it more simple. Let's put that in there like that. So once we've downloaded the JSON data with this download JSON function, we want to parse it with our parse function here, but we want to add this to our list. So I'm going to do results dot append. There we go. But what we need to do is, if we don't do some kind of break out of this loop, then it's just going to run through all of the pages and try and add nothing to our list each time, because we've got here it just returns nothing if the length of the products is 0. So what we want to do is let's just add in a try. So we're going to try and add this here and accept. If it can't, we're going to say, and we're going to finish it, and we're going to do a print statement of completed, and let's do total pages is equal to, let's make this an F string, and we'll do page, except this will be the next page over, so we want to do page -1. So that should work, and then we can break out of this too, and then we can return our results list out of this function. So now what we want to do is we want to run this main function and then pick up any of the errors that I've made. So let's just run that and let's see what we need to fix. It's always going to be something. Should be going through the pages. Okay, completed total pages is equal to 2, so we did get some data. So let's put in a quick print statement up here. Let's make it under here and let's do print getting page and what we on page, like that. Let's put a space in there. Okay, so now we can see that it's working. So let's do products is equal to what comes out of our main function, and then let's print the length of that. I think this should be 2 because we'll be having a list of lists, getting page 1, 2, so we can see that we have that there. So now we just need to flatten this list into a main one altogether, and the easiest way to do that is with list comprehension. So now we can say totals is equal to, and we can just do let's do item for I in products for item in I think that's right. And then let's print the length of our totals, and if I've not done that wrong, 2,896. There we go. So all we're doing with this is we're basically just taking the list of lists and we're just turning it into one big list of 2,800 and something products, which is going to be everything on there, including all the variants, which is what we are after. So now that we know that this works, what I'm going to do is I'm going to now look at creating a basic SQLite database using data set that we can add all the products to. And what we're going to do is we're going to say if that product already exists in the database, we're going to either skip it or update it, probably just skip it for now. If not, we'll add it. So every time you run this, if they've put a new product live, you'll be able to see that straight away without having to go through all of the store, etc., etc. So this is something that if you were looking at keeping track of a few different Shopify stores, you could just run this and save the products to the database, and every time there's a new one, you could make some kind of alert system, probably an email or something like that if you wanted to. Okay, so this works here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to we can leave that closed. I'm just going to do if name is equal to main here. This is just a way of making the program run if we are inside it, otherwise it won't. So it just means you can import this in somewhere else if you wanted to. So what we're going to do is we need to create our database first. Now dataset handles all of this for us, so we can just do db is equal to dataset.connect, and we can just give it the path to our SQLite database, and we can just write it in here, and if it doesn't find it, it will create it. So we can just do I think it's SQLite and 1, 2, 3, and let's call this one products.db. There we go. And then we need to create a table. So we can say our table is equal to db for our database that we just created here, and let's create our table. So let's call this one let's call that products, and let's just call this one Allbirds for the sake of whatever reason. And now we can loop through all of our products and add them if they do not exist to our database. So let's do for I in, let's not do I because we've used I already. So let's do for P in totals. Now we can do if not. So we're going to say if this product doesn't exist. So we can do if not, come up here, and we want to do table.find, and I think find one is a good way of doing this. Now I'm going to use on the variant ID like I explained earlier. So if we come back to our, not this one, our parsing one, here we go. So the variant ID here. So we're going to use this key here. So it's going to search because this is going to be our main key. And actually we need to change the way that we create the table. So we need to do db.create table, and then we're going to call it all birds. Excuse me. And we're going to say, I think it's primary key. Primary ID is equal to variant ID. Okay, so that should work for us there. So we got our primary ID is the variant ID that we created up here. There we go. And now what we're going to do is we're going to say if the variant ID in our database is equal to, and we've called it P, so we're going to say variant ID here. Then if that doesn't exist, we want to add it. So we're going to say table.insert the P, sorry. So all we're saying is for products or P in our totals, if you look for it in our database and you don't find it, we're going to say to insert it, and we just need some quote marks around that one. There we go. And that should be fine. And we're going to say new, we'll just print it out here. So we'll say print new product. We don't need that. And we should then just print P. Okay. So hopefully if I run this now, we'll find out what I've done wrong. Oh, we're going to see, oh, there we are, adding them all now. New product, adding them all. So this might take a short while. Now, so as you can see, we just added them all one by one. Now this isn't ideal for when you're working with a database, but it should be okay for smaller projects and personal projects like this. But realistically, you would want to do that all in one go and do a commit, and also have a rollback in there if it doesn't work or if it fails, so you don't mess up your database. But I'm not going to do that for this because I think this is simple enough that this should work just fine. So what I'm going to do now is if we just come here and say, we'll put in a little else statement just so you can see it working. Print skipping product. So hopefully now when we run this again, it's going to check and it's going to find these products in our database already, and we're just going to get a load of skipping products. We don't need to let that run. So I'm going to remove that because that's not useful. So we can see what we've done is we've taken all of this information off of the store, and let's expand all of these and quickly run through them. So we're creating a class of which we can use for any Shopify store now. We've got our because we're giving it a new URL each time. We're downloading the JSON data and checking the length of the list that comes back, and if it is 0, we're going to return nothing. If it's good, we return the data, and then we can just pass through and get out the information that we want. Now in Python, a JSON data basically just works as lists and dictionaries, so we can easily access parts of the keys and lists through that, and this is what the data that I've chosen to pull out. We're putting it into a list, looping through all the pages, flattening our list out, and adding it to a database. Nice and simple. So what we're going to do now is we're going to check through the database in a database browser, and we'll just have a look at the data in there, and we'll delete some records and see if we can add them back in by this method. Okay, so I've opened this in DB browser for SQLite, and I can't seem to make this any bigger, so I'll just zoom in on the screen. We can see here's our table with all of our information that we've got in, and if we go to browse data, we can see that we've got it all here, all the records, and we've got all the information that we put in, the variant ID of course being the main one. We can see here, here's the available, so whether this is a 0, this is not available, and we've got the dates of when they were created and updated. So this is quite cool. This is a nice way of doing it. We could take this database and we could use it for anything that we wanted, whatever you like. So putting the information and then displaying it in a different way. So I'm going to delete a few random records and we'll just add them back in. Cool. So now I'm going to save and exit this. So let's write those changes and close the database and come back to our code. Let's run it again. So hopefully we should see some flip by. You can see, there we go, new product. It's finding them, it's seeing that they don't exist in the database, and it's added them all back in. So these are the ones that we just deleted. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this one. It's a bit longer of a video, but this is kind of like a full, complete Shopify scraping project. You might find it useful. The code will be on my GitHub if you want to look at it and mess around with it. It can definitely be improved. I'll leave that down to you. So hopefully you've enjoyed it, guys. If you like this sort of content, please consider subscribing and sticking around for more. I've got lots of web scraping stuff on my channel already and more to come, along with other Python things like app building, etc., etc. All that good stuff to come. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.